He rejected her because she was poor and regretted it when she returned with his rival and two identical twin daughters. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Amara Johnson adjusted the collar of her simple cream dress for the third time, her fingers trembling as she stood in the cramped bathroom stall of the NYU library. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on her face, emphasizing the dark circles under her eyes, evidence of 2 sleepless nights since the pregnancy test had changed everything. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. Her hand instinctively moved to her still flat stomach. In there, a life was forming, a life that connected her to one of Manhattan's most eligible bachelors, a man whose world couldn't be further from her own. The subway ride from Elmhurst to Manhattan felt eternal. Seated between a construction worker and a woman juggling grocery bags, Amara clutched her worn leather bag where the pregnancy test lay wrapped in tissue paper. Each stop brought her closer to the Blackwood Tower, that gleaming monolith of glass and steel where Ethan conducted the business empire his family had built over generations. For 6 months, they had existed in a bubble. Secret dinners at exclusive restaurants where no one would recognize him, nights in his Upper East Side penthouse, whispered promises that she tried not to put too much weight on. She was 22, a scholarship student from Queens. He was 32, Harvard Business School, heir to billions. The math didn't add up, and yet, when the subway doors opened at Lexington Avenue, Amara stepped out with her heart in her throat. Rain had started falling, light at first, then with increasing determination as she walked the 3 blocks to the Blackwood Tower. By the time she pushed through the revolving doors into the marble-floored lobby, her shoes were soaked and her dress clung uncomfortably to her legs. The receptionist looked up, a practiced smile faltering when she took in Amara's appearance. "May I help you?" Her tone suggested the only help Amara might need was directions to the nearest exit. "I'm here to see Ethan Blackwood, Amara Johnson. He's expecting me." A small lie. Their meeting wasn't for another hour, but she couldn't bear to wait in the lobby under the receptionist's judgmental gaze. A phone call later, Amara was directed to the express elevator. As the numbers climbed toward the penthouse executive floor, her stomach churned with morning sickness and anxiety. The elevator doors opened directly into Ethan's corner office suite, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, a kingdom surveyed by its prince. Ethan stood with his back to her, phone pressed to his ear. His bespoke suit hugged broad shoulders, his posture radiating the confidence of a man who had never been told no in his life. Photos lined the credenza behind his desk, Ethan shaking hands with 2 former presidents, Ethan on a yacht with celebrities, Ethan at charity galas with models and socialites. None with her. Never with her. He turned, his expression warming when he saw her, though his eyes registered surprise at her early arrival. "I'll have to call you back," he said into the phone before hanging up. "Amara, you're early." "I'm sorry," she began, then stopped herself. She hadn't come here to apologize. "I needed to see you." Ethan crossed the room, leaning in to kiss her cheek rather than her lips, a subtle distinction she had learned to recognize. In public spaces, even his private office, intimacy was measured carefully. "You're soaked," he noted, keeping a careful distance from her damp clothes. "Should I have Clarissa bring you something to change into?" Amara shook her head. The weight of the pregnancy test in her bag felt like an anchor. "Ethan, I need to tell you something." Something in her tone made him pause. He studied her face, his charming smile fading at the edges. "What is it? You look serious." Her fingers trembled as she reached into her bag, extracting the wrapped test. Carefully, she unfolded the tissue paper, revealing the plastic stick with its unmistakable double pink lines. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, the only sound in the vast office was the rain lashing against the windows. Ethan's face transformed, the warm expression freezing into something unrecognizable, something cold and alien. He stared at the test as though it were a venomous snake. "Pregnant," he repeated, the word flat and lifeless. He turned away, walking to the window, creating distance between them. Amara remained rooted to the spot, the test still in her outstretched hand. "I know it's unexpected. I'm still processing it myself, but I thought—" "You thought what, exactly?" His voice had changed, taking on an edge she'd never heard before. He turned to face her, adjusting his Patek Philippe watch, a nervous habit she'd noticed during tense business calls. "A pregnancy? You really think this has any place in my world?" The words struck her like physical blows. Amara lowered her hand. The test now clutched against her chest. Ethan walked to his private bar, pouring himself a generous measure of amber liquid. He didn't offer her anything. "Look around you, Amara." He gestured broadly at his office. "This apartment costs more than everything you'll ever know in your life. My family has connections with 3 governors. What do you have to offer besides a pregnant belly?" Tears pricked at Amara's eyes, but she blinked them away. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "I thought you might want to know. I thought we might—" "We?" Ethan laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "There was never a we, Amara, not really. You were fun, but temporary. A girl from Queens with no refinement, no connections. That would be a burden on my career." He took a long sip of his drink, his eyes cold over the rim of the crystal glass. "My advice? Resolve this or raise it alone. You simply aren't enough." The word enough hung in the air between them, poisonous and final. Ethan walked to his desk, opening his Mont Blanc leather portfolio. He extracted a checkbook, scribbled something, and tore out the check. Walking back to her, he extended it, his expression businesslike. "To cover expenses. Whatever you decide to do is your problem." Amara stared at the check, the amount substantial enough to make her head swim. In that moment, something crystallized within her, a hardening of resolve, a burning clarity. With steady hands, she took the check and tore it into pieces, letting them flutter to the Persian rug between them like confetti. "I don't need your money," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "And my child won't need your name." She turned to leave, dignity the only possession she had left to claim. "Amara!" Ethan called after her, annoyance evident in his tone. "Don't be dramatic. This is the sensible solution." She didn't turn back, her hand already on the door handle. "Goodbye, Ethan." The elevator descent felt like falling through space. When she emerged into the lobby, the receptionist's eyes followed her, perhaps noting the lack of an umbrella, perhaps sensing the devastation written across her features. Rain pummeled her as she descended the steps of Blackwood Tower, each drop mingling with the tears she could no longer hold back. She wrapped her arms around herself, one hand protectively covering her stomach. The gesture felt instinctive, primal, a shield between her unborn child and a world that had already rejected it. The subway back to Queens was packed with evening commuters. Pressed against strangers, Amara let her tears fall freely, invisible among so many raindrops. No one looked at her. No one saw her heart breaking. Her apartment, shared with 2 roommates, felt suffocating when she finally arrived home. Molly and Jen were out, small mercies, leaving Amara alone to sink onto her thin mattress, still in her damp clothes. Tomorrow she would face reality. The double shift at the diner on the corner, the night classes she struggled to stay awake through, the calculations of how she would possibly support a child. Tonight, she allowed herself to mourn the fantasy she'd been foolish enough to believe in. As darkness fell, Amara placed her hand on her stomach again, feeling a resolve harden within her alongside the new life. "We don't need him," she whispered. "We're going to be extraordinary without him." Hours later, exhaustion finally overcame her. As she drifted into restless sleep, one thought crystallized in her mind. She would show Ethan Blackwood exactly what he had thrown away. Amara's tears had dried by the time she awoke, a determination taking hold of her being. Little did Ethan Blackwood know that he had just created his future most formidable competitor, a woman who would one day make his empire look insignificant. The official notification from NYU arrived on a Tuesday morning, the university letterhead stark against the thin envelope. Amara's hands trembled as she unfolded the single page. The words blurred through her tears. Failure to maintain required attendance and academic standing. Suspension of scholarship benefits effective immediately. She placed one hand on her growing belly, now visible at 4 months. "Don't worry," she whispered. "We'll figure this out." The apartment door slammed open as Jen stormed in, waving an overdue rent notice. "Amara, it's the 3rd time this month. I can't cover for you again." Molly appeared behind her, arms crossed. "We talked it over. You need to find somewhere else by the end of the week." "Please," Amara said, her voice barely audible. "I just need a little more time." "You said that last month," Jen interrupted. "I'm sorry about your situation, but we have our own bills to pay." That night, Amara sat cross-legged on her bed, calculator in hand, staring at numbers that refused to add up. Her waitressing shifts barely covered food, let alone rent for a new place. The pregnancy was making her slower, clumsier. Yesterday she'd spilled coffee on a customer, resulting in half the usual tip. "One problem at a time," she told herself, echoing her mother's words from years ago before cancer had taken her. The community clinic waiting room was crowded the following morning. Amara shifted uncomfortably on the plastic chair, surrounded by other women with varying stages of rounded bellies, some with toddlers climbing restlessly over their laps. "Johnson?" the nurse called finally. "The doctor will see you now." Dr. Patel's kind eyes crinkled at the corners as she applied the cold gel to Amara's abdomen. "Let's see how your little one is doing." The whooshing sound filled the small examination room. "Doctor." Patel moved the wand slightly, frowning in concentration. Then her eyebrows rose. "Well, Ms. Johnson," she said, turning the screen, "it appears you have not one, but 2 little miracles here." "2?" Amara's voice cracked. "Twins, both appearing healthy, good, strong heartbeats." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Twins, 2 babies, 2 of everything, cribs, clothes, diapers, double the expense, double the responsibility, double the reason to succeed. Outside the clinic, Amara leaned against the brick wall, dialing the number she'd avoided for months. The phone rang 3 times before a clipped British accent answered. "Blackwood Investments? Mr. Blackwood's office?" "This is Amara Johnson. I need to speak with Ethan." "I'm afraid Mr. Blackwood is unavailable. May I take a message?" Amara's free hand curled protectively around her belly. "Tell him I'm carrying twins, his twins. Ask if that changes anything." The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably. "I'll relay your message." 3 days later, no return call had come. Amara packed her few belongings into 2 suitcases, leaving the key on the kitchen counter. The shelter for women was located in a converted school building in a neighborhood even rougher than her own. The intake counselor, a heavyset woman named Gloria, handed her a worn towel and toiletry kit. "Bed 7 is yours. Curfew's at 9. Breakfast starts at 6. The dormitory-style room held 12 beds separated by flimsy partitions. Amara lay awake that first night, listening to the sounds of women crying, whispering prayers, soothing fretful children. The sheet beneath her was clean but thin, the mattress lumpy and narrow. She thought of Ethan's bed, the Egyptian cotton sheets, the custom mattress that had cost more than a year of her tuition. The contrast was so stark it was almost laughable. Almost. Morning came too soon. Amara joined the line for the communal shower, then headed out for a job interview at an office building downtown. The receptionist's eyes lingered on her pregnant belly before she smiled tightly. "The position has just been filled. We'll keep your resume on file." It was the same at the next place, and the next. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion forced her to a park bench where she counted the remaining bills in her wallet. Enough for a week of meals if she was careful. Not enough for anything else. The community college computer lab became her sanctuary in the evenings. While other shelter residents watched TV in the common room, Amara researched pregnancy, childbirth, and infant care. She applied for government assistance, put her name on waiting lists for subsidized housing, and sent out dozens more job applications. 2 weeks passed in this holding pattern. Then, during a particularly dismal rainstorm, Gloria approached her with an envelope. "Someone left this for you at the front desk." Inside was a business card for Diana's kitchen and a handwritten note. "We need a dishwasher. $10 an hour, cash daily, 4 p.m. to midnight, 1460 Roosevelt Avenue." The restaurant was a small Puerto Rican place, steam fogging the windows, the scent of sofrito and roasting pork filling the air. Amara pushed open the door, her damp coat clinging uncomfortably to her expanding belly. A short woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun looked up from the register. "You Amara?" Gloria called. "About you. I'm Diana." Within an hour, Amara was elbow-deep in soapy water, the industrial dishwasher roaring beside her. The work was hot, wet, and physically demanding, but Diana allowed her frequent breaks to sit and drink water. At midnight, 11 crisp $10 bills were pressed into her palm. "You come back tomorrow?" Diana asked, watching her carefully. Amara nodded, the exhaustion momentarily outweighed by relief. "Yes, thank you." Over the next weeks, Amara established a routine. Mornings at the public library, researching job opportunities and affordable housing. Afternoons resting at the shelter. Evenings washing dishes at Diana's. Her belly grew larger, making the work more difficult. But Diana silently adjusted, moving her to food prep instead. Chopping vegetables, mixing batters, assembling simple dishes under the chef's direction. Gradually, Amara learned the rhythms of the kitchen, absorbed cooking techniques by observation, memorized recipes. Diana began teaching her deliberately how to balance flavors, how to salvage nearly spoiled ingredients, how to stretch expensive components with cheaper ones. One particularly busy night when the line cook failed to show up, Diana put Amara at the grill. "You watch me enough times, now you do." To her own surprise, Amara managed. Not perfectly, but adequately. Diana nodded once in approval, saying nothing more. The shelter's 2-week limit approached, then passed, with Gloria turning a blind eye. "Just until you find something," she said. But Amara knew her reprieve wouldn't last forever. 3 months into her pregnancy, Amara missed her NYU classes more than she would have believed possible. Without the scholarship, continuing was impossible. Each credit hour cost more than a week's wages. She still visited the library, borrowing textbooks when available, reading voraciously about business administration and computer systems, determined not to lose the knowledge she'd fought so hard to gain. One evening, Diana found her crying silently in the restaurant's storage pantry, surrounded by sacks of rice and bins of dried beans. "What is this?" Diana's voice was sharp with surprise. Amara wiped her eyes hastily. "I'm sorry, I just needed a minute." Diana studied her for a long moment, then reached into her apron pocket and extracted a key. "Come, I show you something." She led Amara through the kitchen, out the back door, and up an external staircase Amara had never noticed before. At the top, Diana unlocked a door, revealing a small apartment. 1 bedroom, a tiny bathroom, a combined kitchen living area with mismatched furniture. "My son lived here before college. Now it's empty except when my sister visits from San Juan." Diana turned to face Amara. $500 a month, includes utilities, and I raise your pay to $12. Amara stared in disbelief. "Why would you do this for me?" Diana's weathered face softened slightly. "Nobody builds anything alone, girl. Sometimes we need a hand before we can extend our own." She pressed the key into Amara's palm. You can move in tomorrow." The night before the twins were due, Amara sat by the apartment window, watching Manhattan's lights twinkling across the river. The city that had once seemed so welcoming now represented rejection and cruelty. Yet somewhere in that glittering landscape were opportunities, possibilities she would fight to access for her daughters. She ran her hand over her enormously swollen belly, feeling the twins shift beneath her touch. "He said we weren't enough," she whispered to them. "One day, we'll be more than he ever dreamed, and when that day comes, he'll know exactly what he threw away." While watching the distant lights of Manhattan glimmer from her window, Amara couldn't possibly foresee that in 10 years' time, her face would grace the covers of financial publications, not as someone's powerful spouse, but as the woman who revolutionized the cybersecurity industry. Twin cries pierced the dawn-lit delivery room, a sound Amara had imagined for months but was still unprepared for how it would crack her heart open. They were small, 5 pounds each, born 3 weeks early, but perfect. Zoe arrived first, her tiny fists already clenched as if ready to fight the world. Zara followed 7 minutes later, her entrance quieter but no less determined. "They're beautiful," whispered the nurse, placing the swaddled bundles in Amara's trembling arms. Exhausted from 26 hours of labor, Amara could only nod, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, looking at their identical heart-shaped faces and wispy dark hair, she felt a love so fierce it terrified her. These 2 lives depended entirely on her, a 22-year-old college dropout with no family, no savings, and a part-time job in a restaurant kitchen. Diana arrived an hour later, carrying a small teddy bear in each hand. Her usually stern expression softened as she approached the hospital bed. "So, they are here," she said, her accent thicker with emotion. "Las Gemelas, the twins." Amara smiled wearily. "Meet Zoe and Zara Johnson." Diana nodded approvingly. Strong names for strong girls. She hesitated, then asked the question Amara had been dreading. "The father?" "There is no father," Amara replied firmly, the words already practiced. "Just us." The first weeks passed in a blur of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and crushing anxiety. The tiny apartment above Diana's kitchen became a fortress of baby supplies, second-hand cribs wedged against the wall, a changing table fashioned from an old dresser, stacks of diapers from the community outreach program. Amara established an impossible routine: wake at 5 to feed the twins, study programming tutorials while they napped, work in the restaurant from 4 to midnight with the babies nearby in a makeshift playpen, then collapse for a few hours before the cycle began again. Diana became an unexpected ally, rocking a fussy Zara while Amara bathed Zoe, slipping extra food upstairs when the pantry ran low, adjusting the work schedule when doctor appointments loomed. "My mother helped me when my son was born," Diana explained simply. "Now I help you." 3 months after the births, Amara received an email from Professor Martinez, her former computer science teacher at NYU. She'd reached out to him in desperation, asking if there were any remote learning options for students who couldn't attend classes. "The university has a new pilot program for distance learning," he wrote. "It's not officially open yet, but I've recommended you for early admission. You'll need to maintain a 3.8 GPA to keep the partial scholarship." That night, after the twins were finally asleep, Amara wept with gratitude at her tiny kitchen table, surrounded by programming books borrowed from the library. The path forward was narrow and treacherous, but it existed. By the time the twins turned 6 months old, Amara had established a precarious balance. She attended virtual classes while the babies napped, completed assignments in the pre-dawn hours, and worked at Diana's with increasing responsibility as her culinary skills improved. The exhaustion was bone-deep and constant, but each small achievement felt like a victory against Ethan's dismissal. "You're not enough," his voice echoed in her darkest moments. "Watch me," she whispered to the sleeping twins. "Watch what not enough can do." When Zoe and Zara reached their first birthday, celebrated with a small cake Diana made specially, Amara had completed 2 semesters with perfect grades. Professor Martinez began sending her additional materials, challenging assignments beyond the standard curriculum. "You have an intuitive understanding of systems vulnerabilities," he noted during one of their video check-ins. "Have you considered specializing in cybersecurity?" The field appealed to her immediately. The challenge of protecting valuable information, of identifying weaknesses before they could be exploited. She recognized the metaphor in her own life, building impenetrable walls around what mattered most. By the twins' 2nd birthday, Amara had created a rudimentary security system for Diana's restaurant, protecting the point-of-sale system that had previously been hacked twice. The success gave her confidence to approach other small businesses in the neighborhood, offering affordable security solutions while building her portfolio. Through it all, the twins grew, developing distinct personalities despite their identical appearance. Zoe was analytical, methodically stacking blocks by color before she could walk. Zara was more expressive, humming melodies before she could form words. Both had Ethan's striking green eyes, a daily reminder Amara couldn't escape. On a rainy Tuesday morning in May, with the twins now approaching 3, Amara graduated from NYU, attending the ceremony in person, Diana watching the girls so she could have this one moment to herself. As she accepted her diploma, scanning the sea of proud families, she felt the absence of her own parents, gone too soon to cancer and heart disease. But in their place was something new, her own determination, forged in hardship. The next morning, Professor Martinez called with unexpected news. "I've recommended you for an internship at SecureTech Solutions," he said. "It's entry-level but could lead to something permanent. They're particularly interested in your adaptive security protocols." The interview was scheduled for the following week. Amara spent her savings on a modest navy suit from a consignment shop, practiced interview questions while cooking dinner, and arranged for Diana to watch the twins. "You look professional," Diana assured her, straightening Amara's collar. "Go show them what you know." SecureTech's offices occupied 3 floors of a glass building in downtown Brooklyn. Not Manhattan's financial district, but a significant step up from the kitchen of Diana's restaurant. Amara's hands trembled slightly as she presented her ID at the security desk, hyper-aware of her second-hand clothes and drugstore makeup. The interview panel consisted of 3 people, all men in their 40s with identical expressions of polite skepticism. They asked about her education, her experience, her understanding of emerging threats. Amara answered with growing confidence, describing the systems she'd built for local businesses, explaining her approach to vulnerability assessment. "Your resume is unconventional," said the senior interviewer finally. "There's a significant gap during your studies." Amara took a deep breath. "I had twin daughters during my junior year. I completed my degree through distance learning while working full-time." The men exchanged glances. One nodded slightly, impressed. Another frowned, concerned. The third remained unreadable. "That's quite a workload," said the first interviewer. "How would you manage the demands of this position with your family responsibilities?" The question was borderline illegal, but Amara had prepared for it. "The same way I managed to graduate with honors while raising twins and working nights, with exceptional organization, efficiency, and determination." 1 week later, she received the offer letter. The salary was modest by industry standards, but represented wealth beyond imagining for someone who had been washing dishes 3 years earlier. For the first time, Amara allowed herself to believe that the future she'd promised her daughters might actually be possible. On her first day at SecureTech, Amara was assigned a cubicle and a stack of orientation materials. As she settled in, a man about 10 years her senior stopped by, extending his hand. "Diego Hernandez," he introduced himself. "Senior security analyst. I'll be showing you the ropes." Something about his name tickled her memory. "Hernandez. Have we met before?" He smiled, shaking his head. "I don't think so. I'd remember." Later that afternoon, passing his desk, Amara noticed a financial magazine open to a spread featuring Wall Street's rising stars. There, prominently displayed, was Ethan Blackwood, arm around a willowy blonde in an evening gown. The headline read, "Blackwood Heir Consolidates Empire with Strategic Marriage." Amara froze, the pain still surprisingly fresh after 3 years. Diego noticed her reaction, following her gaze to the magazine. "You know Blackwood?" he asked, his tone cooling noticeably. "Why do you ask?" Diego hesitated, then closed the magazine. "I worked with him at Morgan Stanley before joining SecureTech. Brilliant analyst, but no moral compass. Left a trail of destruction in his personal and professional relationships." A slow realization dawned. "That's why your name seemed familiar. He mentioned you once. Said you lacked the killer instinct for Wall Street." Diego laughed without humor. "That's generous. What he actually said when I questioned some questionable trading practices was that I was too soft for the real game." I took it as a compliment. Amara glanced at the twins' photo on her new desk, then back at Ethan's smug smile in the magazine. "I know enough about him to know I'm going to surpass him someday." Diego raised an eyebrow, studying her with new interest. "Now that," he said with a slow smile, "sounds like a story worth hearing over coffee sometime." While tucking the magazine away, Amara couldn't have predicted that in a decade, she would be the one featured on financial publication covers, not as someone's powerful spouse, but as the woman who revolutionized the cybersecurity industry. The coffee invitation from Diego turned into weekly lunches, then regular weekend outings with the twins. 5 years had passed since that rainy day in Ethan's office, and Amara's life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined while tearfully riding the subway back to Queens. Now 27, Amara stood at the front of the SecureTech conference room, laser pointer in hand, confidently directing her team through a systems analysis. Her simple black blazer was still from a consignment shop, but her posture exuded an authority that made her the natural focal point of the room. "The Peterson account shows these vulnerabilities in their network architecture," she explained, highlighting sections of the diagram. "If we implement this modified firewall protocol, we can address the most critical weaknesses while staying within their budget constraints." Junior analysts nodded, taking notes. The department director, Martin Chen, leaned forward with interest. In the 3 years since joining SecureTech, Amara had risen from intern to team leader, her intuitive understanding of security vulnerabilities earning her rapid promotions despite her unconventional background. After the meeting dispersed, Amara checked her watch. It was nearly 3 o'clock, time for the twins to arrive from kindergarten. Diana, though still running her restaurant, had connected Amara with her niece Carmen, who picked the girls up from school and brought them to SecureTech on afternoons when Amara couldn't leave early. Right on schedule, the elevator doors opened, and 5-year-old identical faces peered out, hands clutched in Carmen's. Despite their mirrored features, heart-shaped faces, dark curls, and those unmistakable green eyes that still sent a pang through Amara's heart, their personalities had diverged dramatically. "Mom, I got a gold star in math today," announced Zoe, racing toward Amara's cubicle with her backpack bouncing. "Ms. Winters said my counting is the best in class." Zara followed more sedately, a colorful drawing clutched in her small hand. "I made this for your desk," she said, presenting a surprisingly sophisticated rendering of what appeared to be their apartment building. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Amara said, kneeling to embrace them both. "Let's get you settled in the break room with your snacks, and then Mom needs to finish one more meeting." As the twins arranged their homework at the corner table, Zoe already insisting on using a calculator while Zara hummed softly over her coloring book, Diego appeared with juice boxes. "The math prodigy and the artist hard at work, I see," he said, giving each girl a playful tap on the nose. Over the past 3 years, Diego had become an unexpected constant in their lives. What began as professional mentorship evolved into friendship, and eventually something deeper. He attended their kindergarten graduation, taught Zoe basic coding on weekend afternoons, and patiently sat through Zara's impromptu living room performances. The twins adored him, and Amara found herself increasingly relying on his steady presence. Later that evening, after tucking the twins into bed in their modest but comfortable two-bedroom apartment in Astoria, Amara joined Diego at the kitchen table. Spread before them were laptops and takeout containers, their regular Wednesday night routine of working on independent projects together. "I found something interesting today," Diego said, turning his screen toward her. "There's a systemic vulnerability in the standard encryption protocol used by most financial institutions. It's subtle. Most people would miss it, but potentially catastrophic." Amara leaned closer, scanning the code with growing excitement. "This is remarkable. If exploited, it could compromise trillions in transactions." Her fingers flew across her keyboard, testing the vulnerability against different scenarios. "But look here, if we modified the algorithm this way, we could create an impenetrable shield." They worked until midnight, lost in the puzzle, building and refining what gradually took shape as an entirely new security protocol. When they finally stopped, both were buzzing with the recognition that they might have stumbled onto something revolutionary. "This is bigger than a patch," Diego said, rubbing his tired eyes. "This is a complete security overhaul that the entire industry needs." The next morning, Amara requested an emergency meeting with Martin and the executive team. In the glass-walled conference room, she presented their findings with passionate precision, explaining the vulnerability and their proposed solution. "This flaw could cost billions if not corrected," she emphasized, highlighting potential exploitation scenarios. "Our solution not only addresses this specific vulnerability, but strengthens the entire framework against future threats." The executives exchanged impressed glances, but then the CFO cleared his throat. "The development costs for this would be substantial. We're already committed to other projects this quarter." "But this is urgent," Amara insisted. "Every day this vulnerability exists is another day the entire financial system is at risk." Martin shook his head regretfully. "It's too expensive to implement right now, Johnson. Maybe next quarter when we reassess the budget." Disappointment settled in Amara's stomach as she packed up her presentation materials. Outside the conference room, Diego waited, raising his eyebrows in question. "They're shelving it," she said flatly. "Budget constraints." That evening, they met at a small coffee shop halfway between their apartments, the twins spending the night with Diana for their regular monthly sleepover. Rain tapped against the windows, reminiscent of that day 5 years ago when Amara's world had shattered and reformed. "I can't stop thinking about the vulnerability," Amara said, stirring her coffee absently. "It keeps me up at night knowing it's out there, unaddressed." Diego studied her thoughtfully. "What if we addressed it ourselves?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we started our own company? Your solution is worth millions, Amara. We both know it. Why should SecureTech profit from your brilliance when they won't even prioritize it?" The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. Start our own security firm? With what capital? I have twins to support, savings to build, stability to maintain. "I've been saving since I left Wall Street," Diego replied. "Not a fortune, but enough for a start. And you have something more valuable than money. You have the solution to a problem the entire financial industry doesn't even know it has yet." That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She stood by the window of their apartment, looking out at the Queens neighborhood that had been their home since leaving Diana's upstairs apartment. The twins had a good school here, friends, a routine. Risking everything on a startup venture seemed irresponsible, and yet, "Sometimes you need to jump without a net," she whispered to herself, echoing words her mother had told her long ago. The next morning, she sat the twins down at their small kitchen table, explaining in simple terms what she was considering. "Mom might be starting her own business with Diego," she said carefully. "It would mean some big changes. We might have less money for a while, and I might be working even more hours." "Will we still have our room?" asked Zara, practical despite her artistic nature. "And my computer?" added Zoe, who had already mastered basic programming on the second-hand laptop Diego had refurbished for her. "Yes to both," Amara promised. "But it's a risk, and I wanted you both to know what's happening." 2 weeks later, after countless late-night planning sessions and detailed financial projections, Amara submitted her resignation to SecureTech. Diego followed suit the next day. Diana, now a surrogate grandmother to the twins, arrived at their apartment with a small envelope. "My savings," she said firmly when Amara tried to refuse. "Invest it in my granddaughter's future." With their combined resources, Diana's savings, Diego's Wall Street nest egg, and a small loan against Amara's modest retirement account, they secured a tiny office space in Brooklyn with chipped paint, second-hand furniture, and a whiteboard that became the canvas for their ambitious vision. The breakthrough tech was born on a rainy April morning, with just 2 employees and an algorithm that could change everything. While the twins slept on an improvised sofa bed in the office corner, Amara worked through the night, refining the code that would form the backbone of their security system. When she finally perfected it at 3 in the morning, Diego was still there, bringing her coffee and reviewing the documentation with bleary eyes. Their first client demonstration came a month later, a mid-sized credit union whose IT director was a former colleague of Diego's. The executives arrived with skeptical expressions that gradually transformed into astonishment as Amara demonstrated how their system could detect and neutralize threats that existing security measures wouldn't even recognize. The contract they signed the following week was modest by industry standards, but represented the first stepping stone on a path Amara had been constructing since that day in Ethan's office. As she and Diego celebrated with a quiet toast after the twins were asleep, her phone pinged with an email alert, a list of potential clients compiled by their newly hired sales consultant. Scrolling through the names, Amara froze at one particular entry: Blackwood Financial Services, a subsidiary of Blackwood Investments. "Something wrong?" Diego asked, noticing her expression. Amara stared at the name, memories flooding back. The torn check, the rain-soaked subway ride, the words that had both broken and forged her. "You simply aren't enough." "No," she said finally, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Nothing's wrong. In fact, I think we should prioritize this particular prospect." She turned the screen toward Diego, pointing to the Blackwood name. "I'm going to show him exactly what not being enough is capable of creating." While signing the contract to present their system to the Blackwood subsidiary, Amara didn't imagine she was taking the first step on a path that would, in just a few years, transform the small startup into a direct competitor of the empire that once rejected her. The contract with Blackwood Financial Services became the first domino in a carefully arranged sequence that would transform Amara's life over the next 3 years. Their presentation to the subsidiary's security team had been flawless, not because Amara wanted to impress Ethan's company, but because excellence had become her standard. The subsidiary's CTO had been so impressed that he'd recommended breakthrough tech to 2 other financial institutions within the month. By the first anniversary of their company's founding, Amara and Diego had expanded from their tiny Brooklyn office to a proper suite in a mid-tier building in Lower Manhattan. Their team had grown from 2 to 15, developers, security analysts, and a small but effective sales force. The twins, now 6 years old, had their own dedicated space in the office with educational games and comfortable beanbag chairs for after-school hours. "Mom, look what I made!" Zoe's excited voice rang through the office one Thursday afternoon as she burst through the door, Carmen following behind with an indulgent smile. The kindergartner thrust a paper printout toward Amara, who was just finishing a client call. "Just a moment, sweetheart," Amara mouthed, wrapping up the conversation professionally before turning her full attention to her daughter. "Now, what have you created?" "It's a calculator program. Ms. Wilson helped me in computer lab," Zoe explained, pointing to the simple code she'd written. Even at 6, her natural affinity for logic and mathematics was unmistakable. Zara entered more sedately, carrying a violin case almost as big as she was. "I got chosen for the school concert," she announced, her quiet pride evident in her slight smile. "Mrs. Abernathy said I have exceptional pitch awareness, whatever that means." Amara embraced them both, still amazed at how these two beings, so identical physically, so different in their talents, could have emerged from her darkest moment. "I'm proud of both of you. We'll celebrate with ice cream after I finish this last meeting." As the twins settled into their corner with Carmen supervising homework, Diego appeared at Amara's office door, excitement barely contained behind his professional demeanor. "First National Bank just signed," he said, closing the door behind him. "And not just for the security patch. They want the full system implementation across all their branches." Amara's eyes widened. First National was the largest client they'd pursued yet, a contract that would require them to double their staff but would also establish Breakthrough Tech as a serious player in financial cybersecurity. "This changes everything," she said softly, the implications unfolding in her mind like dominoes. "We'll need more developers, a larger office space, new equipment, and a new place to live," Diego added with a smile. "Boston's tech environment is more favorable for growing startups, and First National's headquarters is there. They want us close during implementation." The move to Boston 3 months later was both exhilarating and terrifying. Amara found a charming 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood with excellent schools. The twins, now approaching 7, adapted with the resilience of childhood. Zoe immediately joining a math enrichment program, Zara finding a prestigious youth orchestra that welcomed her budding talent. The new Breakthrough Tech offices occupied the 11th floor of a gleaming building overlooking Boston Harbor. With 30 employees now, Amara had been forced to delegate responsibilities she'd previously handled personally. The growing pains were real, but so was the satisfaction of seeing her vision materialize. On a crisp autumn morning 18 months after the move, Amara arrived at the office early to prepare for a video conference with a potential government client. As she settled at her desk, her assistant knocked gently. "Morning delivery," Julia said, placing a thick envelope on Amara's desk. "It's the advance copy of Fortune." Amara's hands trembled slightly as she removed the magazine. There, on the glossy cover, was her own image, poised, confident, dressed in a simple but elegant navy suit, her dark hair swept into a professional updo. The headline read, "The Unlikely Billionaire: How a Single Mother Revolutionized Cybersecurity." The article detailed Breakthrough Tech's meteoric rise, focusing on the revolutionary security protocol that had now been adopted by 17 major banks and, most recently, by the Federal Reserve's Digital Infrastructure Division. It mentioned Amara's background in broad strokes: scholarship student, single mother of twins, former restaurant worker, painting her as the quintessential American success story. What it didn't mention was Ethan Blackwood, the rejection that had both broken and forged her, or the satisfaction she felt each time another financial institution chose her system over competitors, including those used by Blackwood Investments. That evening, during their regular family dinner, Diego raised his water glass in a toast. To Amara Johnson, cover model and cybersecurity genius. The twins giggled, clinking their glasses enthusiastically. "And to our big news," Diego added, giving Amara a meaningful look. They had discussed timing this moment for weeks. "What news?" asked Zara, immediately alert to the change in atmosphere. Amara took a deep breath. "Diego has asked me to marry him," she said, reaching for his hand across the table. "And I've said yes." The twins' reactions were instantaneous and opposite. Zoe began calculating logistics immediately. "Will we have to change schools? Will our last name change? Will you still be our dad the same way?" Zara, eyes filling with tears of happiness, simply launched herself into Diego's arms. "I knew it. I told Zoe you would ask someday." Later that night, after the twins were asleep, Amara and Diego sat on their back porch, watching stars appear over the Boston skyline. The engagement ring on her finger was elegant but understated. Diego had understood that flashy displays of wealth would never resonate with Amara after all she'd been through. "Are you happy?" he asked, his arm around her shoulders. Amara considered the question carefully. "Happy feels too simple for what this is," she said finally. "I'm grateful, proud, determined to keep building." The breakthrough tech's expansion continued at a breathtaking pace. By the time the twins turned 8, the company occupied 3 floors of the Boston building and had opened satellite offices in San Francisco and London. Their security system, now in its 3rd generation, protected governmental databases and critical infrastructure as well as financial institutions. The morning after a particularly successful presentation to European investors, Amara was reviewing quarterly projections when an email notification appeared on her screen. It was an automated news alert she'd set up years ago, any major development regarding Blackwood Investments. Blackwood Investments loses Federal Reserve contract to competitor with enhanced security measures. The article detailed how the Federal Reserve had opted not to renew its decades-long relationship with Blackwood's financial services division, instead choosing a more innovative security provider. Though not named directly, Amara knew the provider was Breakthrough Tech. Diego entered her office carrying coffee in her favorite mug. He noticed her staring at the screen. "Blackwood lost the Fed," she said simply, turning the monitor so he could see. Diego studied her face carefully. "Does that make you happy?" Amara closed the article, turning instead to the photograph of her daughters on her desk, their school portraits showing 2 confident young girls with matching smiles but distinctly different personalities. "It's not about happiness," she said finally. "It's about justice." In her spacious office overlooking Boston Harbor, Amara couldn't know that in just 2 years, when Breakthrough Tech became a billion-dollar company, her path would cross with Ethan's again in a confrontation neither of them could have predicted. As Amara watched the notification about Blackwood's decline fade from her screen, a notification popped up on her calendar. The Forbes digital issue featuring her on the cover was being released today. 2 years had passed since that first Fortune magazine cover, and now, at 32, Amara Johnson had become a fixture in business publications. The newest headline proclaimed, "The Unlikely Billionaire: How a Single Mother Revolutionized Cybersecurity." The valuation of Breakthrough Tech had reached $1.2 billion following their latest funding round. Their revolutionary security protocol now protected banking systems across 3 continents, with government contracts forming an increasingly substantial portion of their portfolio. Amara closed her laptop and gazed out her office window at Boston Harbor. Ships moved silently across the water, reminding her of how far she'd sailed from that rainy day in Ethan's office. The memory still stung, but differently now, like pressing on an old scar rather than an open wound. The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Johnson, your daughter's school is calling." Amara frowned. The twins rarely had issues at their prestigious private academy. "Put it through." "Ms. Johnson, this is Principal Winters. There's been an incident with Zara. She's not hurt, but we'd appreciate if you could come in." 30 minutes later, Amara entered the principal's office to find Zara sitting stiffly in a chair, eyes red-rimmed but defiant. Zoe sat beside her, an unusual anger tightening her normally analytical expression. "What happened?" Amara asked, sitting between her daughters. Principal Winters sighed. During family history presentations, Tyler Brookstone suggested that children from broken homes were at a disadvantage. He specifically mentioned Zara and Zoe as examples. "I told him we don't have a broken home," Zara said, voice trembling. "But he said everyone knows real families have a mom and dad who are married and asked where our real father was." Amara felt the familiar ache bloom in her chest. The twins were 10 now, curious and perceptive. They'd accepted Diego as their father figure without question. But lately, their inquiries about their biological origins had become more frequent. That evening after dinner, with Diego quietly supporting her from across the living room, Amara sat with the twins on their oversized sectional sofa. "You've been asking about your biological father," she began carefully. "I think you're old enough now to understand a little more." Zoe, methodical as always, had already prepared questions on her tablet. "Is he alive? Does he know about us? What's his name?" Amara glanced at Diego, who nodded encouragingly. "His name isn't important right now, but yes, he's alive, and yes, he knew about you from the beginning." "Why didn't he want us?" Zara asked, the question Amara had dreaded most. Amara chose her words carefully. "Your biological father wasn't ready to be a parent. When I told him I was pregnant, he made it clear that a family wasn't part of his plan." "Was it because you weren't married?" Zoe pressed. "It was more complicated than that," Amara explained. "He came from a wealthy family with certain expectations. I didn't fit into his world." "Because we were poor?" Zara's perception cut straight to the heart. Amara nodded. Money and social status were very important to him. He offered financial support, but not his presence or his name. What she didn't say, how he'd called her not enough, how he'd offered a check as if buying his way out of fatherhood, how he'd looked at her pregnancy as an inconvenience to be eliminated rather than a miracle to be cherished. Diego moved to sit beside them. "Family isn't just DNA," he said gently. "It's who shows up every day, who builds memories with you, who holds your hand during the hard times and celebrates during the good ones." "Like you," Zoe said matter-of-factly. "Like me," Diego agreed, his eyes meeting Amara's over the twins' heads. Later that night, after the girls were asleep, Amara pulled out a small box from the back of her closet. Inside was a newspaper clipping from 7 years ago, Ethan at some charity gala, looking distinguished in a tuxedo, a champagne flute raised in his manicured hand. She had kept it not out of lingering affection, but as a reminder of what she was building against. Diego found her staring at the clipping. "You okay?" "They deserved more than the sanitized version," she said. "But I couldn't bear for them to carry the weight of his rejection." "You protected them," Diego assured her. "And when they're older, if they want the full story, you'll find the right words." The next morning brought a different kind of challenge. In the Breakthrough Tech conference room, executives from Tech Giant, one of the world's largest technology corporations, presented their acquisition offer. $3.5 billion, said Catherine Wong, Tech Giant's chief strategy officer. "Full integration of your security systems into our global platform, with guaranteed positions for your entire executive team." Amara maintained her poker face, though her heart raced. The amount was staggering, enough to ensure financial security for generations. The twins could have everything money could buy, and she would never again feel the gnawing fear of poverty that still occasionally haunted her dreams. "We'd need time to consider," she replied evenly. "This isn't just about numbers." Later, alone in her office, Amara stared at the framed photo of the twins on her desk. 10-year-old Zoe had just won her first regional mathematics competition. Zara had performed a solo at Symphony Hall with the youth orchestra. They were thriving, extraordinary girls who showed no outward signs of missing what Ethan had denied them. Her phone buzzed with a news alert, another habit she'd never broken, monitoring Ethan's public life through news feeds. Blackwood faces second divorce battle. Prenuptial agreement contested. Attached was a photo of Ethan, now 42, looking distinctly less polished than in his earlier press appearances. The article detailed his contentious divorce from his second wife, a former model who claimed his emotional unavailability and workaholic tendencies had destroyed their marriage. A second alert followed. Blackwood investment practices under scrutiny following whistleblower complaint. The article described allegations from a former employee about questionable trading practices and potential regulatory violations. Ethan's company, once the crown jewel of Manhattan's financial district, was showing cracks in its gleaming facade. Amara closed the alerts just as Diana arrived for their weekly dinner. Though now in her 70s with health more fragile than she'd admit, Diana remained a bedrock in their lives, having relocated to Boston when Breakthrough Tech moved. Over dinner, Amara shared the acquisition offer, explaining the numbers and opportunities in simplified terms. 3.5 billion, Diana repeated, shaking her head in wonder. From washing dishes in my kitchen to this. Your parents would be proud. I'm not sure what to do, Amara confessed. The money would secure everything for the girls. Diana studied her with the same penetrating gaze that had assessed Amara years ago in the restaurant storage room. Money buys comfort, but not purpose. What do you want to leave your daughters besides bank accounts? The question lingered as Amara visited Breakthrough Tech's new headquarters under construction the following day. The building would be their first owned property, 14 floors of state-of-the-art facilities where the next generation of security systems would be developed. As she walked through the unfinished spaces, she imagined the twins visiting as teenagers, perhaps interning during college summers, possibly leading departments one day if technology captured their interest. That evening, she called an emergency board meeting. Diego, their CFO Maya Chen, and 3 other executives gathered in the conference room as Amara distributed her counterproposal to tech giant's offer. We're not selling, she announced, standing at the head of the table. We're building something that will outlast us all. She outlined her vision: expanded research divisions, a foundation to support women in technology, educational partnerships with universities, not just a company, but a legacy. Tech giant is offering billions, Maya reminded her. That's hard to walk away from. We're not walking away from money, Amara replied. We're walking toward purpose, toward a future we control. The vote was unanimous. When she called Catherine Wong the next morning to decline the offer, the tech giant executive sounded genuinely puzzled. Most founders dream of an exit this size. What are you holding out for? Amara gazed at the construction site of their new headquarters visible from her office window. Something that can't be bought, she replied. Something I'm still building. When she declined the billions offered, trusting her long-term vision, Amara didn't know her decision would put Breakthrough Tech on a direct collision course with Blackwood Investments, and that the next chapter of her story would unfold in the halls of power that once excluded her. 3 years after declining tech giant's acquisition offer, Amara stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of Breakthrough Tech's headquarters, watching dawn break over Boston Harbor. The new building, 14 stories of gleaming glass and sustainable architecture, now housed over 400 employees across multiple specialized divisions. The company valuation had surpassed $4 billion, making Amara's decision to reject the $3.5 billion buyout seem prescient rather than reckless. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman transformed. At 37, she carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from building something substantial from nothing. Her simple silk blouse and tailored trousers were a far cry from the worn dress she'd once worn to Ethan's office, though she still preferred understated elegance to ostentatious displays of wealth. The intercom on her desk buzzed. Ms. Johnson, Tokyo is ready for the video conference. Amara turned from the window, straightening her shoulders as she sat behind her desk. With a tap on her tablet, the wall screen illuminated, revealing 5 Japanese executives seated around a polished conference table. Ohayo gozaimasu, she greeted them, bowing slightly. Thank you for accommodating our time difference. For the next hour, Amara guided the conversation with practiced ease, discussing the implementation of Breakthrough's newest security protocol across Japan's banking network. When the final agreements were confirmed and the screen went dark, her assistant entered with a stack of mail. These require your signature, Julia said, placing folders on the desk. And these arrived for the twins. Amara's breath caught as she recognized the Phillips Academy crest on the thick envelopes. The prestigious boarding school in Andover had been the twins' top choice. 13-year-old Zoe attracted by their mathematics program, Zara by their renowned arts curriculum. Tucking the envelopes into her bag, Amara glanced at her calendar. The twins would be home from school in 3 hours, and she wanted to be there when they opened these letters that could shape their academic futures. One more thing, Julia added, lingering at the door. The Metropolitan Gala Benefit Committee called. They're inviting you to be the keynote speaker at this year's event. Amara looked up sharply. The one at the Guggenheim in New York? Julia nodded. They're honoring innovators in technology. The theme is Building Tomorrow. They specifically requested you. New York, Manhattan, the epicenter of a world that had once rejected her so completely. When is it? Amara asked, her mind already calculating. 3 weeks from Friday. They'll send the jet if you accept. After Julia left, Amara sat motionless, considering the invitation. The Metropolitan Gala Benefit was among the most prestigious charity events in New York, attended by the city's financial and social elite. The kind of event where Ethan Blackwood would be a natural fixture. The thought of potentially seeing him after all these years sent an unexpected tremor through her hands. 13 years had passed since that rainy day in his office, yet the memory of his cruelty remained vivid. You simply aren't enough. Her phone chimed with a message from Diego. Flight from London landed. Home in an hour. Miss you and the girls. Diego had been overseeing the opening of their European headquarters, another milestone in Breakthrough's global expansion. Their marriage 4 years earlier had formalized what had already been true. They were partners in every sense, building both a business and a family with equal dedication. That evening, after Diego had returned and the family had settled around the dining table, Amara placed the Phillips Academy envelopes before the twins. "These came today," she said simply. Zoe, practical as always, opened hers methodically, careful not to tear the envelope. Zara ripped hers open with artistic abandon. Twin gasps filled the room as they read simultaneously. "I got in!" Zara's voice trembled with excitement. "Full scholarship for violin." "Me too," Zoe added, already scanning the details. "They want me for their advanced mathematics track." Diego beamed, raising his water glass. "To the future Phillips Academy class of 2028. As the twins excitedly discussed dormitory arrangements and course selections, Amara shared the gala invitation. "The Metropolitan Benefit in New York," she explained. "They want me to give the keynote." Diego's expression shifted subtly. Blackwood Investments is usually represented at those events. The twins' conversation halted, both girls suddenly attentive. Though Amara and Diego had been honest about their biological father in broad strokes, they'd never shared his name or details about his family. "Are you concerned about running into him?" Diego asked carefully. Amara considered the question. "I used to be, but we've built something remarkable, something he said wasn't possible. I'm not hiding anymore." "Can we come to New York too?" Zoe asked, eyes bright with calculation. "We could visit Columbia and NYU. They both have amazing computer science programs." "And the Met," Zara added. "And Carnegie Hall. Please, Mom?" Amara hesitated, a protective instinct flaring. If Ethan attended the gala, and if he saw the twins, with their unmistakable green eyes and the Blackwood facial features she'd come to recognize in photographs of his family, the careful separation she'd maintained between her past and present would collapse. "We'll see," she said noncommittally. Later that night, after the twins had gone to bed, Diego found Amara in her home office, researching the previous year's Metropolitan Gala attendees. "He's on the list, isn't he?" Diego asked, sitting across from her. Amara nodded, turning her screen to show a photo from the previous year's event. Ethan Blackwood among a group of financial executives, looking older but still recognizably the man who had shattered her world. "Are you ready to potentially see him, after all these years?" Amara closed the laptop. "I've been preparing for this moment since I walked out of his office. Every milestone, every achievement. They were all building to the day when I could stand before him as his equal, or more." Diego studied her carefully. "Is it worth the risk of exposing the girls to him?" It was the question that had troubled her since the invitation arrived. The twins were curious, intelligent young women on the cusp of formidable educations. Sooner or later, they would investigate their origins more thoroughly. The carefully maintained barrier between their past and present couldn't hold forever. The next morning, Amara found herself at Diana's apartment. Though now in her 80s and increasingly frail, Diana's mind remained sharp, her advice still valued above all others. "The girls want to come to New York," Amara explained, pouring tea for them both. "But he might be there." Diana considered this, her weathered hands cradling the delicate teacup. 13 years ago, you left New York because he pushed you out. Now you avoid places because he might be there? You show him who you became. Not for revenge, but for justice. 2 days later, Amara confirmed her acceptance of the keynote role and arranged for a family suite at the Four Seasons. The twins were ecstatic, immediately researching museums and universities they wanted to visit during their New York weekend. As the date approached, Amara worked with a speechwriter to craft her keynote, focusing on resilience and innovation. She never mentioned Ethan by name, but wove her personal journey into the narrative of technological disruption, how outsiders often see solutions that established players miss, how adversity breeds creative problem-solving. The night before their departure, Amara stood in her closet, surveying the selection of evening gowns her stylist had sent over. Her fingers lingered on a sapphire blue Dior creation, elegant, commanding, worlds away from the rain-soaked dress she'd worn that fateful day. In her jewelry box, tucked in a small envelope at the very back, were the fragments of Ethan's check, preserved as a reminder not of him, but of the woman she'd become in defying him. She touched the envelope briefly, then closed the box. The following afternoon, the Breakthrough Tech private jet, a recent acquisition that still felt surreal to someone who once counted subway tokens carefully, ascended into clear skies. Zoe sat with her laptop, coding a new app she'd been developing for student scheduling. Zara practiced finger positions silently on the neck of an imaginary violin, headphones delivering the concerto she was preparing for a recital. Diego reviewed Amara's speech notes, suggesting minor adjustments. "You're going to captivate them," he assured her. "Just be yourself, the woman who built a security empire from scratch while raising 2 brilliant daughters." As the jet began its descent toward New York, Amara gazed out the window at the familiar skyline, the Blackwood Tower still prominent among the skyscrapers. She touched the small envelope in her purse where she kept the torn check fragments, a talisman of sorts that had traveled with her through every major milestone. While the jet of Breakthrough cut through the skies toward New York, Amara didn't imagine that in less than 24 hours, the man who once judged her inadequate would stand before her and her daughters, confronted not only with her success, but with the living consequences of his past choices. The New York skyline materialized outside the jet window, each gleaming tower a testament to ambition and power. Amara felt her heart quicken as they began their descent. Somewhere in that jagged horizon stood the Blackwood Tower, where 13 years ago she had walked out with nothing but her dignity and an unborn secret. The Four Seasons welcomed them with practiced deference, the staff unaware that the elegant CEO had once been turned away from establishments like this. As the family settled into their suite, Amara stood by the window watching Manhattan pulse below. "Nervous about tomorrow?" Diego asked, joining her. "Not nervous," she replied. "Ready." The day of the Metropolitan Gala benefit arrived with perfect autumn weather. While the twins toured the MoMA with their private guide, a graduation gift from Diego, Amara spent the afternoon with the stylist and makeup team in their suite. The transformation was meticulous. Her dark hair swept into a sophisticated updo, makeup enhancing rather than masking her features, the sapphire Dior gown conforming to her figure as if created for her alone. "Mom, you look like royalty," Zara gasped when the twins returned, their own preparations about to begin. Standing before the full-length mirror, Amara barely recognized the terrified young woman who had once clutched a positive pregnancy test in trembling hands. The reflection showed someone entirely new, a woman who had earned every inch of her success, every dollar of her empire, every moment of respect that now came naturally. Across Manhattan, in his Upper East Side penthouse, Ethan Blackwood adjusted his bow tie with fingers less steady than they once had been. At 47, his face showed the strain of recent years, the financial setbacks, the divorce battles, the growing whispers of Blackwood Investments' declining influence. Gray threaded his temples, and fine lines had permanently settled around his eyes. "The car will be here in 20 minutes, Mr. Blackwood," his assistant reminded him through the intercom. Ethan sighed, reaching for the crystal tumbler of scotch on his dresser. The Metropolitan Gala had once been a triumph for him, a place to court investors, charm socialites, reinforce his position among Manhattan's elite. Tonight, it represented something closer to desperation. 3 major investors had expressed concerns about recent performance. The gala offered a chance to reassure them in person, away from boardrooms and balance sheets. The Guggenheim Museum glowed under strategic lighting, its iconic spiral transformed into a showcase of opulence for the evening. Limousines disgorged passengers in waves, women in couture gowns and family jewels, men in impeccable tuxedos with 7-figure watches subtly displayed. Ethan moved through the early arrivals with practiced charm, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries, carefully avoiding questions about the Morgan Stanley account that had dropped Blackwood last quarter. A Swiss banker he'd been pursuing for months greeted him with polite distance. "I've been meaning to call you, Blackwood. We're redirecting our portfolio toward technology, moving away from traditional finance. The world is changing." Ethan maintained his smile with effort. "Blackwood is evolving too. Perhaps we could discuss our new digital initiatives." The banker's eyes slid past him, focusing on something at the entrance. "Excuse me, there's someone I must greet." A ripple of energy moved through the crowd, the particular buzz that accompanies the arrival of genuine importance. Photographers clustered more densely, flashes intensifying. Ethan turned, curious about who commanded such attention. The woman descending the main staircase seemed to draw all light to herself. The sapphire blue of her gown caught the chandelier's glow, her poise magnetic as she navigated the space with graceful authority. It took Ethan's brain several seconds to process what his eyes were registering. Amara Johnson. The champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The sound was lost in the room's general murmur, but the cold splash against his shoes jolted him back to awareness. It wasn't just the shock of seeing her, transformed from the girl he'd dismissed to a woman who radiated power and confidence. It was the 2 young women flanking her, along with a distinguished man he vaguely recognized as a former Wall Street colleague. The girls were perhaps 13 or 14, identical in feature yet distinct in bearing. One carried herself with analytical precision, her gaze methodically assessing the room. The other moved with artistic grace, her expression more openly curious. Both possessed the same unmistakable green eyes, Blackwood eyes, that had looked back at him from family portraits for generations. "Isn't that Amara Johnson?" The Swiss banker had returned, watching Ethan's reaction with interest. "The breakthrough tech founder? My fund is desperate to get into her next investment round." Ethan couldn't respond, his throat constricted as he watched investors who had declined his meeting requests now forming an eager receiving line for Amara. A senator greeted the mathematical twin with surprising familiarity, mentioning a coding program she had developed for public schools. The orchestra began playing a Vivaldi piece that the artistic twin had apparently performed at Carnegie Hall the previous month. The room spun slightly as Ethan downed another champagne flute, then a whiskey from a passing server. 3 drinks later, he found the courage to approach the bar where Amara stood momentarily alone, reviewing notes for her upcoming speech. "Amara, how long it's been? You look different." His voice, once so confident, wavered slightly. She turned, her expression professional and composed, the face one might present to a forgettable business acquaintance. "Ethan, I wasn't expecting to see you here." Her calmness infuriated him. 13 years of wondering, of glimpsing her ascent through business news, of recently realizing who might have built the security system that was outperforming Blackwood's contracts, and she greeted him as if he were a minor client. "Those are my daughters?" he asked, lowering his voice, the liquor emboldening him. Amara's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Those are my daughters," she corrected, her emphasis deliberate. "Diego is the only father they know." At that moment, the man and the twins approached, the girls carrying small plates from the buffet. The analytical one. Was it Zoe? He had seen the names in articles, immediately sensed the tension, her eyes narrowing as she assessed him. "Mom, is everything okay?" she asked, positioning herself slightly between Amara and Ethan. "Perfectly fine, sweetheart. This is Ethan Blackwood, an old acquaintance." Ethan stared at the girls, seeing his mother's cheekbones, his grandfather's distinctive brow. The evidence was undeniable. These extraordinary young women carried his blood, his legacy. "Your daughters are remarkable," he managed, desperately searching for a foothold in this encounter spiraling beyond his control. "Perhaps we could speak privately. I'm sure we have much to discuss after so long." The announcement cut through the moment. Amara Johnson would now take the stage to receive her Innovation of the Year award and deliver the keynote address. Ethan watched, paralyzed as she excused herself and moved toward the platform, the twins and Diego forming a protective formation around her. Under the spotlight, Amara accepted the Crystal Award with grace, then approached the microphone. The room fell silent, Manhattan's elite collectively holding their breath for the woman who had revolutionized financial security from outside their ranks. 15 years ago, she began, her voice clear and steady. "I was a scholarship student, pregnant, homeless, without money or support. A man told me I wasn't enough for his world." Ethan felt sweat beading on his forehead as she continued, describing precisely the abyss he had created and how she had transformed it into a bridge. She never mentioned his name, but her narrative mapped exactly to their history. The rejection, the struggle, the eventual triumph that had made her company worth more than his family's century-old institution. "When someone tells you that you don't belong," she concluded, "sometimes they're revealing their limitations, not yours." Thunderous applause followed. As Amara descended from the stage, Ethan noticed 3 investors who had expressed interest in Blackwood's new security division now clustered around her, business cards extended. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Someone had made the connection, or perhaps multiple someones. He caught fragments. "Johnson and Blackwood have a past. Those girls look just like him. He rejected the most successful woman in cybersecurity." The final humiliation came when a Financial Times journalist approached him directly, recorder extended. "Mr. Blackwood, can you confirm that you denied paternity of the daughters of the most successful CEO in cybersecurity?" Under the crystal chandeliers of the museum, the power inversion was complete. His empire crumbled in real time while hers continued ascending. When the master of ceremonies announced that Amara Johnson would take the stage to receive her award, Ethan didn't imagine that the speech she was about to deliver, in front of cameras and the financial elite, would be the beginning of the public collapse of what remained of the Blackwood empire. The journalist's question hung in the air as cameras flashed, capturing Ethan's expression of stunned disbelief. His face, once handsome and assured, now appeared gaunt under the museum's unforgiving lights, perspiration beading along his hairline. The Financial Times reporter pressed closer, recorder extended expectantly. "No comment," Ethan managed, his voice barely audible as he turned away, searching desperately for an exit route through the elegantly dressed crowd. On the other side of the Guggenheim's grand rotunda, Amara ascended the steps to the podium, the crystal award catching the light as she placed it carefully on the lectern. The audience settled into an expectant hush, Manhattan's elite leaning forward in their chairs. Every eye in the room focused on her, except for those now watching Ethan's increasingly frantic retreat toward the bar. "Thank you for this recognition," Amara began, her voice steady and clear. "But this award doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to every person who refused to accept limitation as destiny." From their front row seats, Zoe and Zara watched their mother with matching expressions of pride. Diego sat beside them, his hand occasionally squeezing Zoe's shoulder when she glanced toward the agitated man by the bar. 15 years ago, Amara continued, I sat in a shelter for homeless women, pregnant with twins, having lost my scholarship, my housing, and what I thought was my future. A powerful man had looked at me, a scholarship student from Queens, and decided I wasn't worthy of a place in his world. A murmur rippled through the audience. Several heads turned toward Ethan, who now gripped the bar counter, knuckles white as he signaled for another drink. "He told me I wasn't enough," Amara said, her voice gaining strength. "Not enough for his world of privilege and power, not enough to be the mother of his children." The words landed like precision strikes. Near the bar, a venture capitalist who had been scheduled to meet with Ethan the following morning discreetly checked his phone, then typed something quickly. Cancellation, undoubtedly. What that man couldn't see, Amara continued, was that being deemed not enough by someone who measures worth by bank accounts and family connections isn't a limitation. It's liberation. It freed me to define success on my own terms. She detailed her journey without self-pity. The night shifts cleaning offices while studying code, the tiny apartment above Diana's restaurant, the gradual building of expertise that led to Breakthrough's revolutionary security protocol. The system we created, which now protects trillions in assets worldwide, was born in the hours between midnight and dawn, coded on a second-hand laptop while my daughters slept beside me. Her eyes found the twins, her expression softening momentarily. They were my motivation, my reason to persist when conventional wisdom said a single mother without connections couldn't succeed in technology. In the audience, 3 more investors who had been courted by Blackwood Investments exchanged glances, then subtle nods. One surreptitiously photographed Ethan's increasingly disheveled appearance with his phone. Today, the company we built is valued at over $4 billion, Amara stated matter-of-factly. But its true value isn't in its market capitalization, it's in the opportunities we've created for others, particularly women and minorities who, like me, were told they didn't belong in the rooms where decisions are made. Applause interrupted her, genuine and sustained. When it subsided, she concluded with words that seemed addressed to everyone and no one. When someone tells you that you don't belong, that you're not enough, remember that boundaries are often just invitations to transcend them. As she left the podium to thunderous applause, journalists surged forward, cameras flashing. Across the room, the crowd around Ethan had thinned noticeably, creating an island of space that emphasized his isolation. Zoe, ever observant, leaned toward her sister. "That man keeps staring at us," she whispered, "the one who spoke to Mom earlier." Zara nodded, eyes narrowing. "And everyone keeps looking between him and us. Something's happening." Diego placed a protective hand on each girl's shoulder. "Let's find your mother and head back to the hotel. It's getting late." "Who is he, Diego?" Zoe asked, her analytical mind already connecting threads. The way he looked at us was strange. Before Diego could answer, a cluster of reporters approached, surrounding them with microphones and cameras. "Are you Amara Johnson's daughters? The twins she mentioned in her speech? Is it true that Ethan Blackwood is your biological father? How does it feel to meet him for the first time tonight?" Diego stepped between the girls and the press. "No questions, please. They're minors, and this is a private family matter." Across the room, Amara was similarly surrounded, handling the sudden scrutiny with practiced grace. "My daughter's paternity is not a topic for public discussion. What matters is the work we're doing at Breakthrough Tech to secure digital infrastructure worldwide." A reporter persisted, "But Ms. Johnson, isn't it true that Ethan Blackwood rejected you when you were pregnant, only to see you build a company now worth more than his family's century-old business?" Amara's expression remained composed. "My personal history has shaped my professional journey, certainly. Beyond that, I have no comment." Meanwhile, Ethan found himself cornered by a CNBC correspondent. "Mr. Blackwood, sources confirm you had a relationship with Amara Johnson years ago. Did you know her twin daughters were yours? And what do you make of Breakthrough Tech now outperforming Blackwood Investments?" Sweat visibly soaked through Ethan's custom shirt. This is preposterous," he stammered, his polished facade crumbling. "I have no comment on Ms. Johnson's personal claims or her company's temporary success." The word temporary hung in the air, immediately captured by several recording devices. By morning, it would feature prominently in headlines contrasting Breakthrough's meteoric rise with Blackwood's steady decline. Diego managed to navigate through the crowd, reuniting the twins with Amara near the exit. "We should go," he murmured. "This is becoming a circus." In the sanctuary of their limousine, silence settled heavily. Zoe was the first to break it, her logical mind demanding clarity. "That man is our biological father, isn't he?" she asked directly. "Ethan Blackwood. I looked him up on my phone just now. He runs Blackwood Investments." Amara exchanged a glance with Diego, then nodded slowly. "Yes, though biological father is the extent of his connection to you." "Is he the one who said you weren't enough?" Zara asked, her artistic temperament making the emotional leap her sister's analytical mind had approached differently. Amara took both their hands. "This isn't how I planned to have this conversation, but yes, he is." "He looked desperate," Zoe observed clinically, "like someone losing a game." "Not a game," Amara corrected gently. "Consequences. When people make choices, sometimes those choices return to them years later." Back at the Guggenheim, the evening's dynamics had shifted irrevocably. Where Ethan had once moved confidently among admirers, he now found himself isolated, watching as investors clustered around Amara's departing figure, business cards extended toward her assistant. A text message illuminated his phone, his largest remaining investor canceling their breakfast meeting. Then another, the board requesting an emergency session tomorrow. And a third, his publicist, demanding to know why she hadn't been briefed about the Johnson situation. As the gala dispersed, whispers followed Ethan to the exit. A tech journalist cornered him one final time. "Is it true, Mr. Blackwood, that you told Amara Johnson she wasn't enough for your world? How does it feel now that her company is outperforming yours?" Ethan pushed past without answering, his hand trembling as he reached for the door. Outside the Four Seasons, Amara gazed at her daughter's reflections in the limousine window. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations, media speculation, and a reckoning with the past she had carefully managed for 13 years. But tonight had also brought something unexpected, a sense of completion, of circles closing, of justice served without a single act of vengeance. While the family left the Guggenheim under the relentless glare of flashes and the growing buzz of rumors, Amara knew that the public exposure was only the beginning. The real storm would come the next morning, when headlines revealed to the world the story she had kept for 15 years, and her daughters discovered the man who had rejected them before they were even born. Dawn broke over Manhattan, illuminating the headlines that had exploded across financial and social media overnight. Amara's phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand of their Four Seasons suite, each notification heralding another publication breaking the story. The Wall Street Journal's headline was prominently displayed on her screen, "From Rejection to Empire: How Amara Johnson Built Billions After Abandonment." She silenced the device and gazed at her sleeping daughters in the adjoining room of their suite. They looked peaceful, unaware that their world had fundamentally shifted. The truth that had been carefully managed for 13 years was now public fodder, their origin story splashed across business sections and gossip columns alike. Diego entered with coffee, his expression somber. CNBC is running a special segment comparing Breakthrough's trajectory against Blackwood's decline over the past decade. They're calling it the ultimate revenge success story. Amara shook her head. It was never about revenge. It was about proving something to myself. A gentle knock at the bedroom door interrupted them. Zoe emerged, her tablet already in hand, Zara following close behind. Both looked as though they'd slept little. "There are 57 articles about us," Zoe announced, her analytical mind having already quantified the situation. 23 specifically mention Ethan Blackwood as our biological father. 15 include side-by-side photos showing our resemblance to him. Zara sat beside Amara, her artistic sensitivity making her more vulnerable to the emotional undercurrents. "Why didn't you tell us everything? You said he wasn't ready to be a father, but you never said he was cruel to you." Amara set her coffee down, drawing both girls close. "There's a difference between honesty and burden. I wanted you to know your origins without carrying the weight of his rejection." Zoe had positioned herself by the window, her posture rigid as she scrolled through more articles. "He called you not enough. He offered you money to take care of the problem, that problem being us." Her voice was clinical, but her hands trembled slightly. "Why would he not want us?" Zara's question cut straight to the heart, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "What was wrong with us before we were even born?" "Nothing," Amara said firmly, moving to embrace her daughters. "Nothing about you. The deficit was entirely his inability to see beyond his privileged world, his failure to recognize what truly matters." Diego joined them, sitting on the ottoman opposite. "Family isn't DNA," he repeated the words that had become their mantra over the years. "It's who shows up every day, who builds memories with you, who holds your hand during the hard times." "Like you did," Zoe acknowledged, her logical mind processing, categorizing, accepting. "You've been more our father than biology could ever make him." The suite's phone rang, interrupting the moment. The front desk reported that Ethan Blackwood was in the lobby, requesting to speak with Ms. Johnson. He was becoming increasingly insistent. "He has some nerve," Diego muttered, but Amara placed a calming hand on his arm. "It was inevitable," she said. "Let's go down together, as a family." In the elegant lobby of the Four Seasons, Ethan Blackwood cut a diminished figure despite his expensive suit. His face showed signs of a sleepless night, red-rimmed eyes, skin sallow beneath a hasty shave. When he spotted Amara and her family emerging from the elevator, he straightened, attempting to reclaim some semblance of his former commanding presence. 15 minutes, he said without preamble as they approached. "That's all I ask. They're my daughters too. I have rights." Amara's gaze was level, unflinching. "Rights are for those who accept responsibilities. You chose to have none." Around them, other hotel guests pretended not to notice the confrontation while stealing obvious glances. A business executive at the concierge desk was openly recording with his phone. "I was young, stupid, afraid," Ethan insisted, his voice cracking slightly. "I made the biggest mistake of my life." "I agree," Amara replied calmly. "It was the biggest mistake of your life, but it was also the greatest blessing of mine. Look at us now. I built an empire while you watch yours crumble. Isn't that ironic?" His gaze shifted desperately to the twins, who stood slightly behind their mother, Diego's protective presence at their backs. "Please, I just want to know you. We share blood, a connection." Zoe stepped forward, her analytical mind having calculated exactly how to wound most effectively. "Mr. Blackwood, our company's stock has risen 3% since the beginning of this conversation. I'd prefer not to waste market time on sentimentality." Ethan flinched as if struck. Zara moved beside her sister, studying him with the detached curiosity of a scientist examining a specimen. "I spent years imagining who you might be. The reality is disappointing." Something collapsed in Ethan's expression, the last vestiges of the arrogant man who had once dismissed Amara so cruelly. In that moment, he seemed to truly comprehend what he had thrown away. Not just a woman of extraordinary capability, but the chance to know these remarkable young women who carried his features, but none of his weakness. "I'd like to make amends," he said, his voice barely audible. "Financially, of course, but also—" "We don't need your money," Amara interrupted. "We never did. What we needed was your humanity, and you failed that test 13 years ago." As they turned to leave, a hotel employee approached Amara discreetly. "Ms. Johnson, your jet pilot called. They're ready whenever you wish to depart." Ethan watched the exchange, the reminder of her private aircraft, a luxury he had recently been forced to sell amid Blackwood's financial troubles, twisting his expression further. 6 months after the confrontation at the Four Seasons, Amara sat in her Boston office reviewing quarterly projections. Breakthrough Tech had expanded into 2 additional international markets, and their new quantum encryption protocol had been adopted by 17 governments worldwide. Her assistant entered with the afternoon mail, including a thick envelope bearing the Blackwood Investments logo. Inside was a formal offer. The board of directors was considering selling the Blackwood Tower, the very building where Ethan had once crushed her dreams. Breakthrough Tech was listed as a potential interested buyer. Amara smiled faintly at the irony. Purchasing the Blackwood Tower wouldn't be revenge, it would simply be good business. The building was well located, properly maintained, and available at a favorable price given the company's desperate need for liquid assets. As she contemplated the offer, her assistant informed her that Ethan had tried 3 times that week to schedule a meeting, claiming to have a business proposition. "Tell him I'm busy building something that will last," Amara replied, closing her laptop. That evening, she visited Phillips Academy in Andover, where the twins were thriving in their first semester. Zoe had founded a coding club that partnered with inner-city schools to teach programming skills. Zara was preparing for a violin recital at Lincoln Center, her talent having earned her recognition beyond the academy's prestigious walls. On her drive back to Boston, Amara's phone alerted her to breaking financial news. Blackwood Investments declares bankruptcy following investor exodus. The accompanying article detailed how, following the revelations at the Metropolitan Gala, key investors had withdrawn support, accelerating the company's already precarious financial slide. 3 weeks later, Amara signed the purchase agreement for the Blackwood Tower. Standing in the lobby where she had once been dismissed by a condescending receptionist, she turned to Diego and the small delegation from Breakthrough. "We'll rename it, of course," she said, gazing up at the soaring atrium. "The first 3 floors will become an innovation center for women-led startups. The boardroom where Ethan once held court will be converted into a scholarship foundation office." Diego squeezed her hand. "Breakthrough Tower has a nice ring to it." That night, in her home office, Amara opened the small box where she kept the fragments of Ethan's torn check, not as a reminder of him, but as a testament to her own worth that she had recognized even in her darkest moment. 15 years after leaving the Blackwood Tower in tears, Amara Johnson returned as the building's owner. Not as an act of vengeance, but as living proof that when someone says you aren't enough, sometimes it's just the universe whispering that you were born to be much more than they could ever imagine. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.